looked and said, "Alive?"
It was one of the most inconceivably heinous crimes the state had ever seen. 13-year-old Robyn was known in the small community of Berea as someone with a kind heart. She enjoyed being with friends and family and participated in various sports such as track, gymnastics, softball, and cheerleading. She was the only child from her mother's second marriage, where Robyn tragically lost her father to a heart attack only 1 year after her birth. Nancy Field was devastated by her husband's passing, but her 5 other kids from her previous marriage were more than happy to help her raise the bright and vivacious Robyn. Despite their period of grief, it was a loving home where Robyn learned the value of helping others. In doing so, she made no exceptions when it came to her generosity. However, some on the receiving end would be quick to take advantage of her selfless character. On Tuesday, April 22, 1986, Robyn left her house for Rome Middle School early in the morning. Her day was nothing out of the ordinary, but that would only last a short while. Taking the school bus, Robyn typically arrived home between 2:45 and 2:50 p.m. However, when it came time for her stop, she wasn't there. Her half-sister Sharon Schultz would come to notice Robyn's unusual absence when she received a call around 3:30 from one of Robyn's classmates, 15-year-old Warren Paxton Brown, who went by Paxton. He briefly inquired if Robyn was home, to which Sharon stated that she hadn't returned from school yet. Paxton said that he would call back later before hanging up the phone. It was Sharon's birthday and she had plans with her sister to go for dinner and to go shopping. But seeing as only little time had passed since Robyn was supposed to have come home, Sharon wasn't especially concerned about her sister's whereabouts. But that would all change soon enough. Hours went by and there was still no sign of the 13-year-old. Eventually, Nancy was notified of her daughter's strange absence and immediately drove home from work. She made several phone calls to friends and family in the hopes that they may know something, but to no avail. There was no sign of Robyn anywhere. It wouldn't be long before the mother rallied a large search party that not only included Robyn's close relatives, but also many of her friends, such as Paxton, and her next-door neighbor and close friend, 15-year-old Michelle Jackson. Robyn's half-brother Rick recalls when he found out that Robyn was missing in an EWU exclusive interview.
I worked late that day. I arrived home to an empty house about 8 p.m., and there was a note there telling me that my sister Robyn was missing. She didn't make it home from school that day, and that everyone was gathered at my mother's house. I headed over there and started asking questions. They filled me in on what they had known so up to that point. And the last they knew was that she got off the school bus and she was last seen with 2 boys.
The frantic hunt would leave the community in utter heartbreak as they were unable to locate even a single clue as to where she might be, although they never could have imagined just how close she really was. At 10:15 that night, Robyn's family filed a missing persons report. Their distressing search continued into the next day. However, it unfortunately ended in the worst way imaginable. On Wednesday, April 23rd at 3:35 p.m., a local fisherman along the South Rocky River in Strongsville came across a ghastly scene. He found a young girl's body lying face down in the water, with only a green sheet wrapped around her. When police arrived, they immediately rushed her to Southwest Hospital. There, Ken and Rick Schultz, Robyn's half-brothers, positively identified the victim to be their little sister. Though Rick was only 23 at the time, he had assumed the role of family patriarch, and the grim task had fallen on his shoulders.
We went to the hospital, and we were met in the parking lot as soon as we got out of the car by a few of the Berea police officers, one being our friend, and he warned us that the person we were there to look at was, and he's pretty sure it was Robyn. He gave us a few minutes to get ready, and we were brought into the hospital, and they had Robyn covered up. They pulled back the sheet, and it was her. She was kind of muddy, and so we identified her. Then I had to do the hardest thing I ever did in my life. I had to go tell my mother. Went home and told them Robyn was no longer with us, that a fisherman had found her in the river in the metro parks about 5 miles from our home.
Her family and friends alike were left in complete devastation.
The temperature the evening she was missing was very cold. If I recall, it was like in the 40s.
Okay.
And that created a problem for the coroner to declare a time of death. And so the investigation, they had a window, but they weren't really sure the time of death. So that was hindering the investigation. And they were thinking it was later in that evening or the next day.
As the investigation began to unfold, police conducted a series of interviews that would go on to expose a twisted web of lies. The truth could only remain hidden for so long. From the second that the town heard the sickening news, several theories began to circulate, one of which became most notable. David White, presumably a friend of Robyn's, informed police that he may have seen the young girl riding her bike with 17-year-old Frank Zelenka along the area of Prospect Street around 4 in the afternoon on the day that Robyn went missing. The pair may have had feelings for each other, or so the rumor was. Some speculated that perhaps Frank had information surrounding Robyn's murder. Not only that, but 1 week before the tragic ordeal, Sharon received a phone call from Robyn's concerned friend Paxton, stating that Robyn should be kept away from Frank. He feared that Frank may try to hurt her. It's unclear if Sharon relayed the message to Robyn, but following the discovery of her body, the police were more than suspicious of Frank. In addition, Paxton informed the authorities that a student from Rome Middle School was shouting obscenities through the hallways, apparently stating that they were happy to hear of Robyn's death. Unfortunately, he could not pinpoint the identity of the sick and twisted individual, but police quickly realized that not everyone shared in the mourning of the community's lost member. Suddenly, there was another possibility that investigators were faced with when a shocking piece of information was brought to light. Robyn was a well-rounded and happy girl, or so that's what everyone thought. Could there have been another side of Robyn, one that she didn't want anyone to see? Police began to ask themselves those very questions when they received word from Robyn's brother, Rick. He told them that his little sister may have written a note expressing her debilitating feelings of depression. Michelle, Robyn's next-door neighbor and close friend, reportedly told Rick that Robyn had shown her the note in person. It's not reported as to when this apparently took place, but the police were then left wondering if there wasn't a killer on the loose after all. Perhaps Robyn had actually followed through with the wishes she'd apparently expressed in her note. As the investigation continued, police would soon uncover exactly why Robyn was never dropped off at her usual spot on that fateful day. According to students who traveled on the same bus, the young girl was seen leaving the vehicle at the streets of Baldwin and Wallace, which happened to be one stop prior to her own. However, police were surprised to learn that when she got off, Robyn was not alone. With her were 14-year-old Jimmy Martin and Paxton. Next, authorities were able to trace Robyn's last movements, where they went on to speak with Charlene and Winifred Murphy, Paxton's aunt and grandmother, who were apparently the last people to have seen her alive. The three friends made their way upstairs to Paxton's room to listen to music, but the hangout was supposedly cut short. Just 15 minutes later, Jimmy left the residence, and soon Robyn did the same. Only she was said to be in complete hysterics as she made her way out the door. This was allegedly the last time that Robyn was seen alive. But there was much more to the story than authorities originally suspected. To their dismay, there was still a substantial amount of puzzle pieces yet to be put together, and little by little, a most twisted and evil plan would be brought to light. They continued with Charlene's interview, where she said that she spoke with Paxton later that night around 8:30 and asked if he wanted to accompany her to the grocery store. Paxton agreed, and requested that they stop at Michelle's house to pick up a note that she supposedly had for him. Next, they drove to the grocery store and returned home just before 9. From there, Charlene explained that Paxton sat on the floor of her bedroom to watch a few videotapes. She fell asleep around 11:30 or 12, and she stated that Paxton was still in the room during that time. As Paxton was one of the last people to have seen Robyn, investigators decided to speak to him next, and the story he told didn't exactly align with that of his aunts. Investigators were left to wonder where exactly the truth ended and the lies began. According to police documents, Paxton was interviewed just hours after Robyn's body was recovered, where he gave a series of statements. He quickly revealed that he and Robyn were more than just friends and had actually been seeing each other for around 3 months, though according to Robyn's family, the pair wasn't necessarily dating. He stated that they usually rode the bus home together on a daily basis, but Robyn supposedly came up with the idea to get off one stop earlier on the day she went missing, so her mother wouldn't see them together. Apparently, Robyn's family never took a liking to Paxton, leading the pair to hide their relationship.
My sister, who still lived at home at the time, she had chased him off many a times because she told him, you're too old to be around her. So she had chased him away.
From the bus stop, they walked to Paxton's house. Upon hearing his account, police were immediately suspicious due to the fact that Paxton had yet to mention Jimmy. Seeing as both Charlene and Winifred stated that Jimmy was waiting outside with the other 2 teenagers, authorities were already questioning the validity of Paxton's statement. Why would he leave Jimmy out of the story? When confronted with the information, he defended himself by saying that his friend did in fact come to the home, but left upon his grandmother and aunt's arrival. However, for an unspecified reason, he explained that Jimmy walked back to Paxton's house around 5 p.m. Paxton continued with his retelling, stating that once he and Robyn entered his bedroom, she said that she didn't want to continue with their relationship any longer. The discussion became emotional as the young girl uncontrollably sobbed while supposedly running out of the house. Paxton claimed to have waited 10 minutes before calling her home phone to see if she had returned. But that was when Robyn's sister Sharon told him that Robyn hadn't made it back home. Paxton allegedly made several more calls in an attempt to locate Robyn, but no one had seen or heard from her. He eventually went to Michelle's residence around 9:30. Together, they made their way to Frank's house to ask if he had seen or heard from Robyn, but he told them that he hadn't talked to her. Michelle and Paxton continued to look for Robyn. However, this was where his story no longer aligned with his aunt's. Remember, Charlene had claimed that her nephew was watching videotapes in her bedroom that night and had never left the house. On the first night that Robyn had gone missing, Rick had learned that Paxton was one of the last people to see Robyn before she vanished. And so after their first search came up empty-handed, Rick continued looking.
I stayed up all night searching, looking. I went back to Paxton's house, snuck to the back of the house about 3 a.m.
Wow.
And seeing that the lights were on. And when I looked in the window, I seen the entire family that lived there were all there and awake at that hour, including Paxton. And like I said, this was like 3 a.m. and this was a school night. So I knocked on the door and demanded to speak to him again. And when I did speak to him, he was very vague, but he was very quick to point out that Robyn was at this boy's house hiding in his garage.
Police were once again met with uncertainty when Robyn's sister Sharon informed them that Paxton had actually stopped by her house that day, inquiring about their search. Charlene also told authorities that she had driven him over. He went next door and spoke to Michelle after having seen Sharon. She didn't specify what time this took place, but it was clear that something wasn't adding up. In the hopes of gaining more clarity, investigators spoke with Jimmy. On April 22nd, he walked to the residence with Paxton and Robyn. He claimed to have never returned that night, despite Paxton having stated otherwise. Police had an uneasy feeling that no one was telling the truth, and this suspicion would only be amplified after learning of another possible suspect, 15-year-old Michelle. According to Nancy and Sharon, Michelle showed very little emotion when it came to Robyn's death. The mother and daughter told investigators that they believed Michelle never actually liked Robyn and was jealous that she and Frank had apparently developed feelings for each other. In a shocking turn of events, investigators uncovered that the supposed friends had an argument the night before Robyn's mysterious disappearance over a betrayal. Robyn was absolutely heartbroken when she found out that Michelle and Paxton had apparently shared a secret kiss, although it's unclear whether this occurred during the pair's unofficial relationship or not. Nonetheless, Robyn was furious, going so far as to write a note to Michelle calling her a and stating that she knew exactly what happened. However, Michelle's retaliation would be much worse. She wrote a strongly worded letter back to Robyn, and the ending immediately landed her in some hot water. At the bottom of her note was a disturbing picture of a tombstone with Robyn's name written across it. However, Michelle explained to police that the drawing symbolized the end of she and Robyn's friendship, nothing more. Regardless, it made her look all the more suspicious, especially given the fact that Michelle and Paxton might have been growing closer behind Robyn's back. Michelle went on to explain that, in her opinion, Robyn was allegedly engaging in activity that was out of character. According to Michelle, she reportedly began to heavily drink and was apparently intoxicated only days before her disappearance. On Wednesday, April 23rd, just one day after Robyn's disappearance, her mother Nancy received a phone call from Paxton. He stated that he'd found Robyn's purse in his home and asked if he could bring the item over. However, Sharon, Nancy's daughter, volunteered to grab it herself. As she began to walk down Wallace Drive, a silver car pulled up beside her. Inside were Paxton, Michelle, and another friend. The vehicle came to a stop, and Paxton gave Sharon the purse left behind by her sister. Skeptically, she questioned him on where he found the purse, to which he said that his Aunt Charlene had actually been the one who discovered it on his bed. But this would only further Sharon's suspicion. In turn, she told Paxton that if he knew anything more about what happened to Robyn, it was time to confess. She went on to warn him that if he were to fail a polygraph exam given by police, then he would be in a lot of trouble. But Paxton oddly defended himself by saying that he was no stranger to the test and had taken it a startling 3 times before. Because of Paxton's bizarre comment, Sharon's suspicions then shifted from Michelle to Paxton. You see, although she didn't know it, the 15-year-old had a most tumultuous past and had been engaging in rather disturbing activities. Paxton was a troubled kid, and he'd been routinely expelled from school. After failing every subject on his last report card, things were rapidly moving downhill. But this was when the generous Robyn stepped in. She knew about his wild tendencies and hoped to give him a sense of stability by offering to tutor him. Friends and family noticed an immediate shift in Paxton's behavior, and things were finally looking up. However, this wouldn't last for long. Paxton was known to have violent tendencies. According to a close friend, Matthew Houlihan, Paxton's family had apparently grown afraid of the 15-year-old, especially his Aunt Charlene. According to a police report, to avoid angering her nephew, she would allegedly buy alcohol for Paxton and his friends, though this has never been verified as true. This small group would refer to themselves as the Masters of Destruction, where Paxton was the leader. According to 14-year-old Norman Clark, who had previously been a member of the Masters of Destruction, Paxton would reportedly beat up on little kids and try to act tough. This may indicate signs of antisocial personality disorder. However, this is only diagnosed in adults. Those who do show symptoms earlier in life may be diagnosed with conduct disorder as a child or teen. The boys went so far as to break into Smith and Fairwood elementary schools, and they did the same to the Berea Board of Education. To further their deviant activity, they engaged in arson, and Paxton reportedly set a fire behind St. Mary's Catholic School, all while taking pictures of the destruction. One day, while at Paxton's house, Norman was left traumatized when he witnessed a brutal encounter. He told police that an argument had taken place between Paxton and his mother, Linda Murphy, while at the home. The dispute suddenly turned violent when Paxton allegedly decided to punch his own mother in the face. Norman didn't go on to state how the altercation ended, though it is safe to assume that Linda may have feared for her own safety from then on. In addition, Paxton had apparently returned from his stay at the Gallahue Rehabilitation Center in Indianapolis, Indiana, just 1 week prior to Robyn's death, though it's unclear how long he was there. Rick also shared some of the disturbing things he heard about Paxton, though it's important to know that these are unfounded allegations and there is no evidence to support them being true.
And we also learned that Paxton was also a little bit in the devil worshiping. He had a shrine type thing in his bedroom, in the bedroom closet.
He allegedly displayed violent and unstable behaviors, yet Robyn wanted so desperately to bring out the good in Paxton. And that is exactly what she did, or so she thought. Sharon left the encounter of Paxton returning Robyn's purse with an uneasy feeling, and still continued on her way to Paxton's house, hoping to speak with Charlene as she had supposedly been the one to find the purse. When she arrived, Paxton's grandmother Winifred answered the door, and Charlene nervously approached the two only seconds later. Sharon asked where the purse was found, and Paxton's aunt told her that she located it outside of the home. However, Charlene quickly changed her story, stating that she had actually found the purse inside of the house. But this was not the only conflicting statement Charlene made during the course of the conversation. As the women spoke, Sharon decided to ask them about the last time they saw Robyn, and at first, they told the same story they'd told police. Then, everything became twisted. Charlene changed her version of events and stated that Robyn had never made her way into the house and had only been speaking with Paxton outside. However, the narrative was altered once more, as Charlene explained that Robyn was inside the residence for only a few minutes, but then stated that it might have actually been 25 minutes. Sharon left with even more questions than she had arrived with, and rushed home to tell her brother Rick about the strange confrontation.
I had my brother-in-law and one of my friends with me, and I spotted the car, so I chased it down, and they were speeding to get away from me, but then the car come to a stop, and he jumped out of the car and ran the other direction. So I jumped out and chased him down, and I caught him. I grabbed him by the neck, grabbed him by the shirt collar, and the kid was a little bit taller than me. And as I was lifting him up, and I said, you better start talking, you better tell me everything. And I said, we better find her, and she better be alive. And he looked at me with the coldest blank look that I've ever seen and said, alive? And right then I went to hit him, and my friends pulled me off of him.
Days went by and the town continued to search for answers, but the truth could only remain hidden for so long. Eventually, police decided to re-interview 14-year-old Jimmy on May 1st. They asked him to give another statement regarding April 22nd, the day of Robyn's disappearance. They believed that he knew more than he was letting on, and as it turned out, they were completely correct. With that, the entire case was flipped on its head. Finally, the truth was exposed. Jimmy informed the lieutenant that on Sunday, April 20th, Paxton told him that he was going to Robyn and take her life because he believed that she had used him. He then requested his friend's assistance in the matter. Because he didn't believe Paxton was serious, Jimmy apprehensively agreed. They made their way to Paxton's house, where they popped into Charlene's bedroom to use the phone. Afterwards, Paxton told his aunt of the unthinkable crime that he planned to commit. In response, she merely laughed at her nephew, to which Paxton stated, "I'm serious." Still, Charlene refused to believe the shocking claim. She had no idea just how deranged her nephew actually was. Over time, Paxton made a disturbing decision. If he couldn't have Robyn, then he'd see to it that no one would. Tragically, had people looked closer, they would have realized the sheer evil that he was capable of. However, this didn't occur until it was too late. According to friends, Robyn was scared to end her romantic relationship with the 15-year-old, fearing that he may hit her. Unfortunately, he would do much more than that.
We heard stories. Actually, we heard one where he was arguing with Robyn shortly before he murdered her, but he grabbed her by the hair and was pulling her down the hallway. And a teacher that told him to knock it off and made a comment about a lover's quarrel. Now, these were junior high school kids.
With Jimmy's detailed confession, the truth of what happened on Tuesday, April 22nd was revealed, and it was far more horrific than anyone imagined. Jimmy told the police that Paxton and Robyn sat together at the back of the bus, while he was just one seat in front of them. He revealed that Paxton told Robyn he wanted her to listen to a tape at his house, to which she agreed. Next, he leaned over to Jimmy and asked, "Should we K her?" But Jimmy claimed he didn't understand what Paxton meant. Paxton then said, "Should we R her?" Disturbingly so, Jimmy told the investigators that Robyn was able to hear part of the conversation and asked what they're talking about. Paxton told her that it was a way for them to rate girls, though this couldn't have been further from the inconceivable truth. When the trio arrived at Paxton's home, he took Jimmy into the bathroom and told him to turn the radio's volume up, as he was about to carry out the heinous crime. They walked back to the bedroom and Jimmy did as he was told, while Paxton went to sit on the bed next to Robyn. From there, he asked her to rekindle their relationship and go steady with him, seeing as the pair had actually ended things only 2 weeks prior, despite the lies Paxton had told police. But Robyn said no. As she tried to leave the room, Paxton stood in her way, refusing to let her go. She began to cry and attempted to flee once more. When she couldn't, Robyn hit Paxton on the side of his head. She screamed and yelled while he dragged her back to the bed, where he spit in her face. Paxton overpowered Robyn and forced her to the ground. With one hand over her throat and the other on her mouth, he asked Jimmy for his assistance. Terrified, Jimmy stated that he didn't want any part of the brutal attack. Though Robyn fought for her life, Paxton forced her onto her back and placed both hands around her neck and hit her head into the ground, knocking her completely unconscious. After a few minutes, Paxton let go, but Robyn was still alive. At a loss for words, Jimmy told his friend that he was going to leave, but before he could, Paxton threatened to shoot him if he told anyone what he'd seen. It seems Paxton was able to manipulate most everyone in his sphere of influence, including Jimmy. However, Paxton gave him one last task and demanded that he bring Charlene into the bedroom. Jimmy followed through with the order and made his way out the door. When we spoke to Rick, he shared another version of his sister's horrifying last moments.
He did say that Paxton beat her with the baseball bat, choked her, and then he called his aunt into the room to check for a pulse. Then he said he got up and left, but he was told that if he said anything that Paxton was going to kill him and his whole family.
He was never charged with anything associated with the murder, and he would later testify against Paxton at trial. Since this was the end of Jimmy's story, authorities brought Charlene in next for an interrogation, as they believed that she was hiding a mountain of secrets. Within minutes, she decided to confess to the brutal truth and didn't leave a single detail to the imagination. The detectives had her continue the story after Jimmy came racing down the stairs. She told the investigators that she went to Paxton's room. Upon entering, she was shocked to find Paxton sitting next to Robyn's body on the floor. Charlene noticed that her skin was blue, and she wasn't wearing any clothes from the waist down and didn't have a shirt on. Charlene was overcome with shock and could barely get the words out to ask what had happened. Charlene told police that Paxton claimed he was merely, quote, finishing it. Before Charlene could say anything else, Paxton stated that he needed to meet Jimmy and quickly fled to the streets of Woodmere and Wallace. Charlene continued her account and stated that she was horrified when Paxton left her with Robyn's body. Next, Charlene told investigators that Paxton's mother Linda arrived home around 4:30, which the teenager wasn't expecting. Charlene didn't inform her of the heinous crime that occurred right upstairs, let alone call the police, as she was afraid of how Paxton would react. Instead, she remained silent. A few minutes after his mother's arrival, Paxton told his family that he would be in his bedroom for the next couple of hours and sternly demanded that no one talk to him. During this time, Linda left the home, and Paxton saw an opening to speak with Charlene without his mother overhearing the conversation. Paxton requested that she come upstairs, where she found Robyn completely naked on the bedroom floor. The two were unsure of what to do, but Paxton decided to place Robyn's clothes in a plastic bag before Charlene took a green bedsheet from a closet and handed it to her nephew. From there, Paxton wrapped the body before he and his aunt carried her downstairs and placed her in the back of Charlene's station wagon. They drove to Michelle's house, where Paxton walked next door to Robyn's home and asked about their search for the young girl. Hauntingly so, he knew exactly where Robyn had been all along. As Sharon spoke with Paxton, she could have never imagined that her baby sister's lifeless body was lying in that car.
After they put Robyn in the back of the aunt's station wagon, they drove down the street. He lived a block away from my mother's house. They come down and they parked the car in front of my mother's house. Paxton got out of the car, and my sister Sharon was there with the family's German Shepherd. And he says to Sharon, "Have you found her yet?" And this is the same thing we heard from him the whole time, it was always, "Have you found her?" Not "Did she come home?" It was always, "Have you found her?" The dog was going nuts, barking and growling, and Sharon just thought it was because the dog didn't like Paxton. It turns out that Robyn's body was just a few feet away from her.
Paxton spoke with Michelle for a couple of minutes before he and his aunt drove to a Metro Parks bridge overlooking the Rocky River. This was where they would horrifically dispose of Robyn's body, as if she were nothing but a piece of trash. Next, they drove to a garbage bin behind a store known as Pick and Pay, where Paxton discarded Robyn's clothes before returning home around 9 p.m. For days, Paxton, Charlene, and Jimmy would lie to family, friends, and police about Robyn's murder, but the inconceivable truth would eventually prevail. However, no one could have predicted just how depraved that 15-year-old boy would turn out to be, and all for his twisted ideas that Robyn's life was only of value if she was with him. On May 1st, 1986, both Paxton and his aunt were placed under arrest. Months later, Paxton finally released a story of his own. And despite Jimmy and Charlene's confessions, Paxton once again tried to save his own skin. On August 27, 1986, while detained at a juvenile detention home, the killer wrote a disturbing letter detailing the horrific murder. Although most of his statements conflicted with that of Jimmy and Charlene's, and it seemed he was trying to place the sole blame of Robyn's death elsewhere. He wrote, "Started to strangle her. I said stop it and he did. Then he said, do what you want. I gotta go. He left. She was choking. It was too late to back out of it. She couldn't go home." Paxton asserted that walked in the room, she apparently tried her best to strangle her. Eventually, Robyn died. He said if anything was to go down, he would run away, not tell, so I ain't gonna be the only one kissing bars for the rest of my life. Finally, he stated, "This will probably make matters worse for me, but gonna burn with me." Paxton was eventually tried as an adult and convicted of aggravated murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. However, he was eligible for parole after 20 years. Charlene, who helped dispose of Robyn's body, pled guilty to tampering with evidence and was placed on probation. 37 years have passed since the horrific murder of Robyn Field, but Paxton claims to have turned over a new leaf. However, he has since been denied parole over the last several years. Robyn's family members have played a major role in making sure that he remains in prison, but this hasn't prevented Paxton from petitioning for his own release. On his website, he confesses his actions, stating, "I committed this crime, I take complete responsibility for it, and I know that there's nothing I can do that will bring Robyn back." He asks that his petition be signed so as to receive a second chance. but the victim's family have been quick to publicly reject the killer's pleas by creating their own petition against his release. So far, they have been successful in keeping Robyn's murderer behind bars and plan on doing so for the years to come. We reached out to Paxton in an effort to allow him to comment on the case, but he declined, citing his concern that the parole board would likely frown upon the communication. His response reads as follows: I appreciate the opportunity to share, but I have to discuss any further participation with Dr. K. Ball, a close family friend. The parole board views any attempt for me to explain my achievements, remorse, or the terrible decision I made as a 15-year-old boy